The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional for any health concerns. Take care of yourself out there. Hey listeners, this is Kurt jumping in. We just wanted to let you know that our podcast has recently been honored with a couple of awards. First, Mary and I were granted the Jack Berry Communications Award from the Vermont Association of Mental Health and Recovery, VAMHAR, and also the NESHCO, the New England Society for Healthcare Communications, has just awarded us their Silver Lamplighter Award for social media.
Yeah, really such an honor. And we just want to thank our listeners for being along with us for this fun journey.
We continue to be very grateful for all of you. Share the podcast, give us reviews on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you listen.
Welcome to Unraveling. This is a podcast that sees the world through the lens of mental health. I'm Mary Wilson, a journalist.
And I'm Kurt White, a social worker and psychotherapist.
And we are so excited to bring you the second episode in our special Pride series episodes this month. And we're going to really explore the issue of identity.
Yes, I was having a conversation with a colleague from the American Group Psychotherapy Association at the conference a couple months ago, who's going to be our guest today, Evelyn Lee. We were talking about Pride and her life in Singapore as a music therapist and setting up work there with the LGBT community and helping to organize Pride events in a culture and a community that hasn't always been so welcoming of LGBT issues. And we got into discussing this sort of really complicated relationship between his sort of internal identity and the wish for that identity to be sort of seen and joined in a community, and the sort of tension there, and how one explores that.
And she uses the powerful medium of music to help people maybe explore or affirm their identities.
Yeah, I think, and that was part of what was so fascinating to me. She was talking about the idea of music as a way of both exploring the kind of internal aspect of identity that could be maybe a private experience, actually, right? But also music is a joining experience when we listen to it together, and that there's a sort of tension between a sort of an identity that's held and kept and guarded, right? And an identity that is sort of shared and validated by others. And when is it safe to be out, right? I mean, that's part of what Pride Month is about, isn't it? It's about being able to be out, but actually that's not an experience that everybody has or can have, right, in their own lives, feeling safe in that way. It's a thing that folks that don't have those identities, I think, take for granted, that the world is always validating of aspects of their identity in subtle ways and in not so subtle ways. How do we know who we are internally and keep that close and value it? And how do we find a sort of community of others that can help us do that? And when is it safe to do it? I find that's just a really interesting tension, and the way that she explores it with music was so wonderful, so creative. I think we've got to have her on the podcast.
Yeah, Evelyn Lee is a music therapist who practices and lives in Singapore with postgraduate qualifications and advanced training in guided imagery and music. Evelyn's professional practice includes dementia, stroke rehabilitation in acute and community hospitals, premature infants with complex needs, and children with developmental delays in special schools, both in Australia and Singapore. She has designed and conducted community music therapy groups aimed at caregivers, the elderly, and preventative mental health. She's been asked to present at numerous international conferences about her body of work.
And I really hope that people enjoy this interview as much as I did talking to her, especially folks that might be wrestling with issues of identity themselves, or have a loved one or know someone that is.
Yes, let's take a listen.
Evelyn, welcome to Unraveling.
Thank you.
You're a music therapist, and I'm interested in that and also other certain aspects of your work, but maybe you could just tell us a little about what it is to be a music therapist and what the work is that you do.
So, I'm a music therapist based in Singapore, and I work primarily with older adults and people who are going through stroke rehabilitation and trauma recovery. I do a lot of work with groups, and I think part of my interest is that I really like how music can really support verbal sharing and open doors into sort of deeper insights. And I use a mix of recorded music as well as live music. And so I play different instruments. I play the guitar, the piano. These are my primary instruments. And we write songs, we co-create with our patients or clients. And it's good fun. I like my job.
You have an interest also in working with the LGBT community, is that right?
Yeah, I do. I've ran women's support groups in the past, as well as being a sponsor for the Pride Parade in Singapore for the past couple of years, which is interesting because I think I was the first therapy practice to be featured as a supporter, corporate supporter, to be so visible in the community. And since then, a lot more therapy practices have come on board as well. So I'm in a group which is who we call ourselves QTSG, which is Queer Therapists of Singapore, and we've been meeting up sometimes for peer supervision as well as just kind of understanding how can we actually support the larger community in Singapore of therapist practitioners of how do we inform people what exactly is gay affirming care as well.
For those that might not know, can you tell us a bit about what the environment has been like for the LGBT folks in Singapore?
Till about 1 year ago, homosexuality was illegal in Singapore. It stemmed from the British colonial law days where sodomy was illegal between men, and then they've kept the law. The penal code is called 377A, and we've been rooting very hard to abolish that rule, even though they say that it's a rule that is there, but it's not really enforced. But I think with the looming threat of risking getting arrested, people feel that they cannot be themselves or they cannot parade themselves as who they are.
I find that really so shocking in a way, that it's just a few years ago that actually it was illegal in this way. Although I suppose in the United States there have been certain laws on the books like that too, and even some Supreme Court cases in the not too distant past. So it's maybe in some ways not so different, but it's kind of amazing. You're the first practitioner to be publicly hanging out a shingle to do work with that community. What has it been like?
To be honest, it wasn't very easy. I think the first year when I was out as a sponsor, I actually had anonymous threat emails written to me saying things like, we noticed that you work with the Catholic organizations and you work with certain religious organizations. I'm sure they're not happy if we inform them that you're promoting certain lifestyles, things like that. But I think it didn't bother me because my relationship with the organizations were really solid. And it's not about, personal support or causes that I align with, but it's really about the quality of the work that's done with the clients and the patients in the setting. It's been mostly underground, like people don't really talk about it. And a lot of public places, when you want to rent spaces to run queer events, if there are government spaces, they actually have sometimes a rule that says that you can't promote events of political ideology or certain lifestyle. And with that, they do imply gay affirming events as well.
And what was it that motivated you to take such a professional risk like that?
I think it's important to be visible, to be in the community. As a queer woman myself, I felt that it was always very difficult to find queer affirming therapists. And so when I decided to strike out on my own to set up my own private practice, I felt like I didn't have much to lose, that I could really do things on my own terms. And I was really standing in the perspective of a patient or a client who's looking for services. And, I need to find someone who is very clear that they support, and not just writing on text or putting up a rainbow flag on your website. I don't think this is enough. I feel like you need to take real action, whether you're doing certain sort of activism in the community or you're supporting, financially. I align with practitioners that take actual steps to support, to align themselves of gay affirming care.
Now, we've talked a bit, before this interview about this idea about a kind of tension between safety and protection and expression in the LGBT community. And I find that to be a really interesting continuum in a way. I hadn't thought about it that way before, but I think both things are very important, actually. And I'm curious how you're thinking about that.
I do see certain parallels with the current political climate in the US as well, where being gay may not be the safest thing out there for some people. Whereas in Singapore, we've always lived that for all these years. And only recently we are told it's kind of safe to be out and proud. And so I do feel like it is a certain sense of power that we have where we choose when to reveal or when to hide ourselves. That for me, hiding is not exactly a repressive move, but it's more of a power move, because you do have full autonomy about who and how you want to reveal yourself at which point in time. And you can always do so at your advantage and not be outed unknowingly or wittingly.
I like that idea that it's a sort of way of having power over your own presence in the world. How do you help people find that and navigate that tension in your work with folks?
I help people through the music choices. So often I would tell people, maybe it's a good time to consider music therapy if you find yourself constantly listening to music and pegging your emotion upheaval so much to the music that you're listening to. So if you're using music to modulate your mood so much, maybe even similar to how an antidepressant might work on you, then maybe music has such a huge influence in your life that you could actually consider regaining control over how you use music rather than having the music control your mood.
Mm.
And we do that through reviewing certain playlists. I would always ask people, start with the most liked songs or the music that is last played. In the past, where we used to listen a lot more on iTunes, they actually have the number of frequency that song is being played, which we don't have it these days. But when I used to have that frequency, I would say, let's sort out the frequency and see which is the song that's most played on your playlist, and have a curiosity. What is it about that song that you're so drawn to? And then we start the conversation from there.
Do you think that relates to this question of identity in that way that we're talking about?
Yeah. So often I'll also ask them, like, is there a song that you relate very much to at the moment? So it narrows down the search to just, songs that they relate personally to, and not just, a trendy song that they're listening a lot at that time.
And I've thought about this a lot in working with this community, that in a way, like a young person who's struggling with their own identity questions, which all young people do, but I think it has certain differences and dangers in the queer community. First a person has to kind of come out to themselves, I think, right? And then I think to navigate the social world that they're in. And so there is this sort of a private process that happens. And I'm curious about the relationship of music to that process.
I think people don't realize very often there is a dark side to music as well.
Mm-hmm.
There was a study by Katrina McFerrin about 10 years ago now about the pitfalls of listening to music. And initially the mainstream media picked it up as rock music is bad for mental health, which we all know is not true at all. And she had to come out and clarify,
Yeah.
no. And of course, the heavy metal community was really upset. And she actually wrote a letter, a blog post to the heavy metal community to say, actually, the media was really misunderstanding my study. What it talked about was that they found that people with predisposed mental conditions did not have the ability to stop listening to music that was making them worse. So if music was making you feel worse, for most people, you're able to have the agency and say, nah, I'm not feeling so great. I'm going to listen to something else. But people with self-harm tendencies or depressive tendencies, they would listen to the music and eventually evolve to a form of rumination. And it results in music being used as a bit of a self-harm tool. And they found that people were predisposed to doing that with heavy metal music. And so relating back to the queer community and their music use is that I do tell them, there is a fine line between using music to relate to your identity and your current state of being versus using music as a form of self-harm.
I mean, I was also thinking about this sort of idea about the need or wish to feel understood or mirrored, in a way, and perhaps in a world that is not supportive, of a person's identity in a particular way. That music might be a way to find a path into that privately. Is that also something that you see?
Absolutely. I think we have this term called resonance, right? Resonating with the music and with the artists. And it's so much more than just the music and the lyrics. It's also these days the music video, the context of what the song is about. And one song that's really popular right now is Lady Gaga's Abracadabra, which is all about, we're all a bit strange inside. All of us are a bit queer. So, you could just embrace who you are. And having that space of being understood, I think is the reason why a lot of young people always just joke about it and say music is my therapy. Because before you can actually afford actual therapy, most people invariably turn to perhaps some books or music. In Singapore, they did a study and they found that for adolescents, they spend about 70% of their waking time engaged in some form of music or another. And that's a long time that they're actually engaged with music.
That's really interesting. And, music has been a real classic way of accessing lots of emotions. I mean, we've talked about some of the darker ones, but also, joy, rapture, connection, also anger and things like that. I mean, how do you think that the getting in touch with that emotional side, or the use of music to be in touch with one's emotions, affects people in your work?
I see it as parallels with process groups of taking risks and trying out different ways of expressing yourself. So in a group, you would do it with another person, but in music, you could do it with the music as well, whether it's singing along to it or even we do a little bit of adaptive songwriting. One of the most powerful songs that I've used is actually Coldplay's Fix You. And I would change the words to fix me. And when you turn the lens to it, singing the song addressed to yourself, and when I try so hard and I don't succeed, instead of when you try so hard and you don't succeed, because Chris Martin is singing to you. And now that with that song, you're singing it to yourself. So just a very simple change in the wording switches the perspective right away. And it allows them to sit with the mirror work of just seeing you as you are. And it can be very difficult, but very powerful as well. Because when you're singing, you're also internalizing the phrasing, the emotion contours, and the resonance of the song, that when you're singing, you're feeling it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So these days, music is also very much engineered for social media. So there is often a very pronounced drop, a beat. And the key motives are usually 10 to 15 seconds because that's what, TikTok or Instagram videos are good for. And usually the theme is a lot shorter now. So it's no longer as organic and natural as music in the past where, the motive and the peak of the music could be a lot longer, but it's kind of socially engineered. So you do hear the main crux of the song usually in the beginning, because if you have two verses and the chorus, people might just lose interest. And so a lot of songs are kind of written with a hook right at the beginning. And I think it has a different kind of effect because now you don't really have the build up of emotions before the main motive or the main emotion in the song. You get your hit right in the beginning, and then it doesn't quite build up as much anymore because it's always done in the first couple of seconds.
I had not thought at all about the idea that the way that social media operates is actually changing the way that music is happening, or that it's more socially engineered. That's really interesting.
A lot of music is actually reverse engineered, in my opinion, to fit those limitations.
That's a little depressing to me. I think, isn't it? I mean, I don't, because I think, we're talking about authenticity in a way, the sort of struggle to find oneself, in a way that is really true. And that there are many obstacles to that, external obstacles that the world isn't welcoming, the world is even maybe punishing, but also internal obstacles. Hard to know what you like, it's especially people are telling you, here it is, I've sometimes tried to be hopeful about the idea of sort of the internet and its connectivity, but you're also pointing out that perhaps we're being more manipulated than ever before in a way, even with this sort of powerful tool that's always been such an engine of self-expression.
Yeah, but I think as with many people in the world, there's not just one source of music, and there is so much music out there, so many artists, and there are still a lot of artists trying to do good work, authentic work. I think it makes us become more discerning about the music that we listen to, and you will know when you find an artist or a song that truly connects with you.
Mm-hmm. How do you know?
I don't know. I just feel it. I have no words for it. I think it's interesting, like just relating back to my recent trip to San Francisco of the AGPA conference, and I just picked out one song that I would have never imagined myself really liking it. And that was really the song that describes my entire experience at the conference of a holiday of a overseas trip. And sometimes it's just about really instinctively about what the music makes you feel or what it reminds you of. So in that song, it reminded me of it was like a country music piece, and the accent and the way it was sung and was spoken just reminded me of the way people were speaking in America. And so that very strangely became my song of my memory of a trip.
That's wonderful. I have experiences like that too. You made me remember that last year at that same conference, it was in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is a weird distance from here. It's sort of like, it's a little too close to fly. The train is so slow, and it's a long drive. But I drove, and it's like a little too long. But I listened to a lot of music on that, and then at some point it was just throwing things at me that I hadn't heard before, and I latched on to a particular song, and I just couldn't. It became like the theme of the conference for me, which was kind of sad. It was sort of about feeling very alone in a way, which is kind of interesting.
So how did you know then, Kurt? I mean, throwing the question back at you.
I found myself singing along. That's what I wanted to play it again, and then I was, in my silly car, sort of yelling it out as I'm going down the road. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say exactly, but it has a certain kind of resonance. It just sort of grabs you.
Yeah, I think what you said is true. You just want to play it again. You will notice that, you don't just allow it to pass. You bring it back, and then you're listening to again 2 songs on. You go, I actually want to hear it again, and you keep revisiting that song, and I think that's where perhaps a certain form of affinity is formed. You may not have words for it, but there's attraction, I guess. I think maybe that's the word.
That's a good word for it. I teach group to master's students, and a thing that I've done in the last couple of years, just kind of impulsively, I'm really no music therapist at all, but we have a very process-oriented class and then two observed process groups where the class divides in half. It's very complicated and emotional, and it's very charged because also the students are at the very end of their degree program, and so they're getting ready to part and to say goodbye, and they're thinking about this complicated experience, and did they like it, and was it hard in particular ways, is it unresolved? And so all these things come into the class and into the group, but in the last day I have them add a song to a playlist, that sort of resonates with it. I don't really give much of a prompt, but I think the implication is that it has something to do with what they would want to share about something with the class. And then we have like a little party on the last day, and we play the playlist, while we're listening to it. And it's very interesting because there's very different songs, that people choose. And it becomes almost like a yearbook of the group or something like that. You know what I mean? And people really love it. I can't believe how much people have liked that.
Do you feel that it's enough to just share the playlist, or do you feel that there could have been a little bit more personal input? I think with like YouTube, you could add a song in the playlist and add notes to it, which I really like of that feature. I don't think Spotify has that ability, but I always feel that when people are sharing songs, I really want to know what is the core message that you want to tell us. Like, pay attention to the song, or this is what I mean. This line really resonates. Am I getting the intention the way the sharer wants it to be? I would really hope. And that's one thing that I've been reflecting on as well when I organize experiential workshops and have people contribute playlists, is that where's that context? I want to just even have a word of what a context is, so I could actually orient my listening and my perception to align with what they are sharing. And that allows me to be closer to people in that way.
And again, we have the sharing and hiding as a kind of a tension, even in something like that.
Yeah. I think ultimately people still want to connect with people. And when we give context, we also have this invitation to others and say, this is how I want to be connected and listened. And if you hear the song and you know my intentions, this is how you can understand my inner world.
So sharing something might expose something about yourself that you're not ready to put into the world in a way. But also maybe it's a kind of a tentative toe in the water, until you know the context, you don't really know what it means.
Yeah, it's like people giving mixtapes in earlier generations. What do they mean? What do all these songs mean?
I still have some of those mixtapes. I do.
Yeah, me too. And sometimes it's nice not to know, because it retains a bit of mystery, a bit of ambiguity.
I loved the mixtape as an idea because I think it was a way to, even without context, that people could venture into expressing emotion toward another person that maybe didn't feel safe enough with words, Although you're right, it isn't a clear message. It's an ambiguous message. I mean, maybe that also relates to this sort of sense of tension of safety and expression in a way. If you can express something ambiguously, maybe it retains a bit of safety in a way.
Yeah, because when you put things out in words, it becomes very clear. Kurt, I think I want to point out to something that is also quite interesting that I've realized in my work, is that many people relate to music that does not really connect with their true self, but they're listening to the music because everyone else is listening to it. So what is popular at the moment, you might feel like you like it, or you feel this compelling need to say, I like it because everyone else likes the song. So I often like to tease out that part in clients that I work with, that, how much of this music in this genre that you really enjoy, because we know the queer community often has certain queer icons like Tracy Chapman, Elton John, Lady Gaga, Kylie Minogue. And there is often this collective pressure as well, expectation that you gotta like these music, right? Because they're like the gay icons. But sometimes they might just like country music. And can I actually hold space for people that, to tell them, you know what, if you don't like Kylie Minogue, if you don't like these artists, it's fine. And this is the space for you to really ask yourself, can you step out of this peer pressure, of this collective expectation of what songs gay people should like, and truly just connect with yourself, even if it's just K-pop or something really, so alternative. Can you allow yourself to feel that you can make these choices as well?
That's very interesting. I remember that too, especially when being young, that like everyone was listening to certain kinds of things. And I often felt like a person that I was not in any group. I don't know. I just couldn't find it. Like I didn't care for a lot of those things. And I think there was probably a little oppositional tendency. I didn't want to, I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to listen to the thing that people would listen to least, I'd like opera or something like that, But, it's really true. The world doesn't, at least in the United States at that time, didn't make a lot of room for people that had a difference in that way. There's a pressure toward conformity. And it's a kind of interesting tension, isn't it?
Yeah. I usually relate back to also internalized homophobia as well. That if you're not honest with your own music choices, will that be a link to being not truly honest about your gender preferences and who you're attracted to as well?
Yeah, you're pointing out a much more fundamental thing, I think, right? About how does a person make space for being who they really are and what they really like?
I use visualization. Part of my work, I use guided imagery. If you're interested in psychedelic assisted therapy, I think there's a lot of parallels to that as well, where I would actually take people through guided relaxation induction, listen to a series of classical music that has emotion contours. And depending on how's their mental space, we'll select the right playlist that mirrors where they're at right now. And then they'll listen and they will have evocative imagery that we do ask them there and then while listening to the music of what it means and how's the music making them feel. Often that engages the unconscious mind and will actually debrief by drawing a pictorial representation of their experience, and which we call a mandala. And that is really a time, I think it bypasses the logic, the ego of, pretending and having expectation of who they should be. But in these sessions, it really allows them to sit in with, what is the music bringing out for them? If it's in their unconscious mind, what is it really that is coming through that wants to be looked at? And when we look at that part of themselves, it allows them to also see that, this is really who I am. And then we relate back to the music and say, if you're really such a quiet person who likes to take slow strolls, then why are you listening to so much of the rave music that you tell me you really like? It's not very congruent, is it? And that's usually the point where they kind of realize that, if I enjoy nature and I like meditation and this is really who I am, and now that when I listen to this music, knowing that I find peace in a different state of mind, it's no longer congruent. Then doing like integration work, we'll say, is there something that really aligns with this self that you've just discovered? And then that's where we also look through new music experiences, new artists to explore together, or sometimes they do it themselves. And that, I think, links to the point of, okay, so now we've discovered what you really like and it's not like the others. And how do you intend to showcase this part of you? Are you going to hide this part of yourself from your friends, or are you going to parade out?
What music are you listening to right now?
I'm actually listening to Chappelle Roan's Kaleidoscope a lot more than I should be, which was first introduced at the online conference, an online group.
Mm-hmm.
And well, for one, that was a song I've never heard of. And I was really drawn to the song because I related to the music as well as the words. And it's just multi-layers, it's like I relate it to my real world, but on the other hand, it also brings me really pleasant memories of the interaction we had as an online group. And how about you, Kurt? What have you been listening to?
What am I listening to?
Yeah.
Let's see. I feel like I'm a little bit between musics at the moment. I sometimes get into that. I was the Shins. I was listening to the Shins, and some of that stuff was really I don't know what. It just had this like powerful resonance to me for a while, and then it faded. So I was listening a lot to Sibelius' Seventh Symphony, which is very. It's a short symphony in one movement, and but very powerful. It has this kind of resolved quality to it. It's kind of a little bit unlike anything I've ever listened to, and it's hard to put into words, but it has a sort of resonance with, I think, a kind of a conflict I've been struggling with about the time in my life that I'm in, and it really just sort of grabbed me in a particular way. Now I think that's sort of like I love it, but it's fading a little into the background, and I think I'm ready for something new, but I don't know what.
Do you feel like listening to something like that, a piece that is so complex, it doesn't quite resolve, do you think it also builds your tolerance sitting with ambiguity and sitting with the unknown?
Well, I think that's the kind of resonance I was looking for, was it sort of like that I needed more of that in my life, ambiguity and sitting with the unknown. It's sort of like that sort of strange conflict of midlife where you get into, here I am, I've done these things, and now what now? And there, the time ahead is maybe a little less than the time behind. I think the time for simple answers to questions is gone. And so I think that kind of ambiguity was something I was looking to build tolerance for. I think it probably did help me to do that.
I think that's the appeal of a lot of 20th, 21st century music, classical music, because, when we go back all the way to Baroque and classical era, things are straightforward. There's resolution all the time, and it's almost mathematical as well. But when you move towards the sort of Ravel, modern time music, slightly things like Philip Glass and folks like that, the songs are ambiguous. They don't have much resolution, and it doesn't even have a direction. And as you talk about it, I think, I can see how it appeals to people who are, not looking to identify with clear directions and resolutions, but just sitting in with ambiguity.
Well, it has been so wonderful talking with you today, Evelyn. I really appreciate it. It's been so much fun. I'm really glad for that. I can easily imagine what it would be like to be in one of your groups.
Thank you, Kurt. I really enjoyed this conversation as well. Thank you.
Thank you again to Evelyn for that really fun interview. I just had a blast talking with her. And joining me again is Mary. And Mary, I'm just going to ask you right away, how about you in this question? What is a piece of music that you just can't stop listening to? And what do you think it says about yourself?
It's been on repeat for me is that Noah Kahn song, You're Going to Go Far. Have you heard this one?
Oh, no, I haven't.
But it's so good.
Yeah.
It's so good. It's about like the passage of time and growth and sort of like the longing for success, the fear of failure. So I guess that might say a little bit about me, Kurt. I don't know.
That's fantastic. We'll have to listen. Very Vermont of you also with Noah Kahn.
Yes.
And so we really encourage you to do the same thing. Give some thought to what are you listening to that you can't stop listening to, and what do you think it says about you? It might be an interesting exercise.
It definitely is.
And if you're out there thinking about this question, give us a call and let us know what you're thinking. We might use this on an upcoming episode. What are you listening to? What does it mean about yourself? Or if there's a song that you have shared with someone else recently that you're really excited about, gosh, we'd love to hear that also. Give us a call, 802-258-POD3, or a voice memo or an email at unravel, UNRAVEL, at brattlebororetreat.org. This will also be in the show notes.
Yeah, please let us know. I would love to see all the responses and to add some songs to my playlist. And if you want to learn more about Evelyn's work, you can go to her website, prospectmusictherapy.com. And you can also find Prospect Music Therapy on Substack and Instagram.
Unraveling is brought to you by Brattleboro Retreat. Our producers at Charts and Leisure are Andrew Adkin, Hans Butow, and Jason Oberholzer.
And you can find us on social media by searching Brattleboro Retreat. Brattleboro Retreat is committed to exploring diverse perspectives on mental health. While we invite hosts and guests to share their insights, the views expressed are their own and do not necessarily reflect the policies or positions of the hospital or its staff.